Bruce Hough. I am a candidate for the 2nd Congressional District being vacated by our good friend Chris Stewart.
What do you think are the interests of Utah's military bases that you think need protecting?
I am a huge proponent of a strong national defense and a strong military. I was a member of the Civil Air Patrol growing up. My father is a World War II veteran, my brother was in the Navy, and my uncle flew in Vietnam. The military is extremely important in my family and to me. I'm an honorary commander of the 388th Fighter Wing at Hill Air Force Base. I'm looking at what they need always, because they are the tip of the spear for the United States anywhere in the world. And, we need more funding in the West Desert for their training, for example. The military needs to be rebuilt right now. We have taken it from in the low 5% of GDP down to less than 3.5% of GDP. And we're in conflicts around the world, but more importantly, we just need to be prepared for something that we hope never happens, but possible conflict with China. That's our greatest military threat right now.
How would you work with the feds to ensure Utah's best interests when it comes to public lands?
When it comes to public lands, when you have a state that's 70% federally controlled, we have to figure out ways to work with the federal government on that. But the first thing we do is we start with not allowing the bureaucracies and the regulatory agencies, we just can't allow them to overreach their statutory scope, what they're allowed to do. We have a good example right now with the BLM attempting to enter into conservation leases on lands that would be traditionally used for grazing and farming and even extraction. It's a very bad idea to allow them to just run amok. The Congress needs to take responsibility for making sure that the regulatory agencies don't overreach. Number two is we need to figure out the patchwork of lands. We have, these are school trust lands. They were intended to benefit education in our state. We don't have access to much of it because it's patchwork. We need to figure out ways to work with private and with the federal government to consolidate lands in a way that we actually derive significant benefit from it. And we need to probably adjust some of the PILT funding as well to make sure that our counties are properly compensated for the land that is not accessible and is not able to be used and exploited properly. And when I say exploit, I mean it in a positive way. Whether it's recreation, extraction, hunting, fishing, agriculture, we need to be able to use it. And when we use it properly and we're good stewards, then it's regenerative. When we lock it up, it actually becomes a high risk to our state. It becomes basically a fire risk if we don't use regenerative agriculture, or we don't do thinning of forests, we don't do things that actually protect humankind and the beauties that nature really provides us.
So what do you have to say about the state of the economy, inflation, spending, all that jazz?
I have 10 children, 22 grandchildren, and there's a $32 trillion debt. It is completely unsustainable. It's putting at risk the promise of America for my grandchildren. And I don't want to see that for my grandchildren or for anyone's grandchildren or children. And so we have to get spending under control. It's hard. For example, we've brought back earmarks. What a stupid idea. We got rid of them and now we brought them back. I know people love it who are in those districts, but it's the wrong thing to do because it leads to corruption, it leads to graft, it leads to influence that's undue in our Congress. Doing earmarks is exactly the wrong way to be doing business in Congress. So we need to get rid of those again. We spend too much, which means we deficit spend every year. We collected $5 trillion and we spent $6.5 trillion last year. That's not sustainable. You can't do it. I can't do it in my own personal life. And even if I was able to do it for a year or two, my debt would get so large there'd be no way for me to pay it back, or for you. And that's where we are as a country. So the good news is we have a country's economy that does have the ability to grow when it's properly managed. Right now, with inflation and with Bidenomics. They've about destroyed all the gains we've made over the last couple of years. We need to get back to a much more conservative approach to spending as well. And by the way, Republicans are as guilty as Democrats in spending. I'm not saying that any one party is exclusively to blame, but as Americans, we have a duty to look for our future, for our children, and we're not doing it. So we have to slow the ship down. Look, if we could slow spending to an increase of 1% a year, we're going to drop the debt very consistently. I'm not even saying stop the ship moving forward. I'm just saying just creep it forward 1% instead of the 4% automatic that we do right now. So we have the ability to do those things. It just takes a little bit of willpower, and it just takes the people to send the right people to Congress to get it done.
What do you see Congress and its role in these decisions that are coming down that are affecting everyday Americans on both sides, all sides, everywhere?
These decisions made by the Supreme Court, most of which I support and I think were rightly decided, and had more to do with constitutional issues, not whether you are pro-abortion or pro-life. They had more to do with it's not a constitutional right. It's actually a state's power to govern those issues. And it was wrongly decided in Roe v. Wade. It was rightly decided in the latest case. But here's the thing. Votes have consequences. One of my opponents voted for Joe Biden and voted for Barack Obama. The court would look very different if they were in power during the time when those vacancies came about. My other opponent did not even vote for the President of the United States in the last election, let alone the Republican candidate. And as a consequence, if people don't actually show up and vote, you end up with people like Biden who would completely change the court in the opposite direction. Voting is a privilege. Voting is a duty, I think. And I mentioned the people in my family who have been in the military fought for the right for us to vote. And we need to vote for the right people so that those kinds of decisions can be made by appointees in a court system, for example. Congress clearly has a role in not legislating on things that should be left to the states. Their responsibility is to really work exclusively on their constitutional legislative powers. That's national defense is a very good example. That's a critical one. But if it doesn't fit into the Constitution as a federal power, then push it back to the states, including pushing funding from, say, the Department of Education. Maybe we don't have enough votes in the Senate to get rid of the Department of Education, but we can legislate more block grants to the states that are unrestricted to allow states to actually make those decisions on a local basis so that parents can make decisions on where and how their kids are educated.
If you're elected, you'll enter office and basically have to file in January to rerun just based on...
Is that true? Well, then forget it. I'm not doing it. Oh, sorry. Really?
Yeah. So, how do you feel about that?
Darn.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I would really like it if the state legislature would provide a provision that said, hey, look, you gathered signatures just within the last 6 months, and so they should be valid for the next election. That would be number one. Gathering signatures is not a great way to enter into the political scheme. We want it to be more open to people, not more restrictive. But it's a difficult system on a timetable like we had on this one, almost impossible. I mean, literally 10 days to prepare for a convention and less than 60 days to a primary. I mean, this is very truncated. And so it's very expensive and it's very difficult. And yeah, I'm looking forward to just a regular season of campaigning rather than having to do it all in 60 days. But
Utah or BYU?
But I'm not avoiding the question on Utah or BYU, but I mentioned I have 10 children. I've had a child attend and graduate from every university in the state. What am I going to say? It's one of those things where you kind of go, I love them all. I'm rooting for the home team when they play. And they don't play against each other that often, so, I have it pretty easy.
All right, Bruce, so are they sun bears or are they humans in costume?
First of all, people have too much time if they're worrying about issues like this on social media. It's one of the reasons I'm not on social media that much, because this is just a waste of time. I kind of think it's a real thing. I think that when the bear gets down, unless there was an edit, that there's some unique species out there. They look a little different, and it could be very real. Yeah, but it could be fake news. It could be AI. It could be any variety of things. And here's the real answer. I don't care.
If the FBI was running a background check, a security check for clearance or something, what is the one thing that would be like the thing you would be embarrassed or felt silly about addressing?
I was lost on the Pacific Crest Trail and didn't know it. That was embarrassing. And this just happened last August. We were doing Section J of the PCT. We were doing 16,000 feet of elevation, 70 miles, 50-pound packs in 4 days. And yeah, I love the outdoors. It's so much fun. But here's the thing. Everybody's like 25 years younger than me. I don't want to be the guy that's holding anybody back. So I'm trying to be very careful about just be slow and steady, just do your thing, just head down, keep going. And somehow we kind of got separated, and I'm following a path that looks like it's the trail. And I recognize the physical area. I can see there's a ridge there, and on the other side of the ridge is where we're going to camp the next night. So I just proceed on that trail. It's a good trail, and I get up to the top, and I see down where we're going to go. I'm going, this is great. There's people ahead of me. There's people behind me. So I go down the trail, and I actually see somebody off in the distance. I kind of yell at them, but they can't hear me. And I go to the campsite, and I'm waiting there, and nobody's there. And I'm thinking, they had to be in front of me. And finally somebody comes up and says, Bruce, you're here. You're lost. I go, I am? I think I'm at the campsite. But they were looking for me because the people behind me didn't find me as they were getting closer and closer, and they thought, what happened to Bruce? So I felt really badly about it, especially because it was the end of the day and people were tired and they were looking for me on some very steep terrain, and it was getting dark. So I was pretty embarrassed by that. And for a guy who does a lot of outdoor work, that was sort of the unforgivable, right? To lose contact with your party.
The race to replace. In-depth coverage on KSL News Radio.